Hi everyone, welcome to Type Talks. Today we are talking about FITE from the perspective of FETI users. And I'll let everyone introduce themselves. And so Spacey, would you like to tell us a bit about you?
Yep. I've been studying typology for a long time. I have a YouTube channel where I talk about MBTI and I type people. And I just really enjoy hanging out with people and talking about typology.
We like hanging out with you too, Spacey. Yeah. And Boris?
Yeah, my name is Boris, and I stutter as Boris Boris. No, I don't. I've become in recent years fairly fond of MBTI. Originally, I thought it was a bullshit concept used by some person in HR that tries to stick a label on me because they don't know what the heck I'm doing, and so they can go to their boss and tell them why to hire me or not. I accidentally fell into MBTI by joining a random meetup, which was mostly an N group, which I really enjoyed very much because for the first time I felt I can talk to 8 or 9 people and feel a connection, which I normally don't find in a general people sample. Long story short, at the end, I now host a meetup in Toronto area where everybody's welcome, MBTI focus. Many of my peers are N, but it's not a requirement.
Mm-hmm. And Natalie?
I'm Natalie. I'm an ISFJ, and I've been into typology for about 8 years now. I have a Twitter account where I talk about typology, which has kind of just evolved into like being my personal diary / typology. And I have a YouTube channel with a few videos, not a whole lot, but yeah, I like talking about type, and that's it.
Cool beans. And hi, my name's Joyce, and I'm a certified MBTI practitioner, and I facilitate the instrument in organizations, and I type and coach people. And so, thoughts on FI. What are some common challenges that you all have with FI users, or a common miscommunication that you have with them as TI users?
Well, can I go to the front of the line? For background, I have, at one point, I dated 3 INFPs in a row. And what I found interesting about the experience is, in general, interacting with INFPs, I do like them, and I find I can very much connect on the common shared NE. You can have like late nights with friends and or folks that are really exciting. So you feel a connection, but they're often in the relationship, and I'm using the term not just in a romantic sense in general. I had to learn to become aware of the dichotomy FI versus TI, because I find it's a hard bridge to gap. To me, TI it's not always correct, but at least it's consistency. Logical consistency is a core aspect of it. And I find FI to me can seem somewhat random. There might be specific topics that are all of a sudden taboo and trigger a response that I wouldn't have expected. There's no right or wrong here. It's just something I have to be very much aware of. And I believe from context, Spacey, you mentioned that you are dating an INFP.
No, you're very much right. Especially when you have like a TI dominant and an FI dominant.
Yeah,
there can be like this level of miscommunication and inability to transmit your understandings that can be really, really difficult to bridge, and it results in a lot of miscommunication. And you're right also that TI, while I'm definitely not always right, I am at least consistent in my general behavior and reactions to things. And FI is definitely not that way. There are certain things that they just have a particular attachment to. And that's why they do. And so even like as an example, when I was trying to figure out what kind of music we like, I was basically trying to figure out like what music that I like maybe that I could play for her that she'll also enjoy. So I'm trying to figure out what kind of music she likes basically. But the thing about FI is it doesn't actually like a certain genre of music or anything. It just likes certain specific musics that they heard it and they liked it. And so there's no way to like detail how how to give that to them, sort of. It's just they know it when they feel it.
I think it's interesting what you guys are saying about consistency, because I find that there are times when I'm not very consistent, just as like a feeler in general. And I have a friend who's an ENTP, and there are times when like she has unknowingly hurt my feelings, but she's usually very good at picking up on when she has, and then like we can work through it, I guess. Like it's easy to understand sort of where she's coming from on a basic level. And then those misunderstandings kind of get worked out. So I don't know if that's like just because I have, like if you're going by the socionics model of my like function stack or whatever, I'm an SEI, so I would have higher FI than maybe a thinking type. So I don't know if that contributes to like some, I don't feel like I'm super consistent, but I understand the need for it, I guess, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's questionable whether what you describe specifically relates to FI or to the thinking versus feeling difference, right?
I think it may just be like a thinking versus feeling thing too. But I grew up with a lot of FI users. So my mom is an ENFP, my dad is an ISTJ. And I find that with my mom, like one thing that I specifically run into with her as an FI user is like as an FE user, I will just like say what I feel and it will all be out there. And I'm kind of like, I have to talk through my feelings out loud. And she very much like kind of, I think she goes more inward with her feelings. And so like, I won't necessarily know what she feels about something, or like I've gotten confused about her responses to me before, because it'll seem like she's ignoring me when she's just trying to like process things internally, and I kind of need that like external response. So I guess that's more like FEFI. But if I go on like a TI like ramble about something, she's just like, she checks out. Like she doesn't get it. It's great. I love my mom. Anyway, that's it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I relate a lot to Spacey when he mentioned about the music and about how FI, it knows it when it listens to it, like if the music resonates with them, but they can't really tell you a guideline for what the type of music is that they like.
Yeah, there's no rule set there. Yeah.
There's no rule set. Yeah. I had an ENFP best friend throughout high school, and she had the same exact thing. So with FJs and FPs, where the communication gap happens is what Natalie mentioned. It's like the FJ wanting to ping back and forth, but the FI user, it is more about internal processing. So it can feel like there's a lack of feedback that I need to calibrate and understand where they're at.
That's actually interesting, Joyce, just in regards to the topic of discussion. We said FI versus TI. Really, it's because they're package deal. It might be FI versus FE and TI versus TE. We can't really say what the root they're in, because the two necessitate each other, right?
Yes.
And I think Natalie kind of mentioned that when she said FE versus FI. So there is no direct counterplay because there's two possible pairings.
No, you're right. It really is TIFE versus FITE. And a lot of that is, even me as a TI dominant, right? A lot of my struggle with FI users is probably a result of my reliance on FE on some level to communicate with people. Yeah.
What kind of confuses me sometimes with FI users is, so sometimes they'll give a lot of TE reasons for a certain opinion they have, but I realize that they don't really hold on to those reasons that much. I internalize what they're saying. So I'm like, okay, so that's the logic of why you're saying that. But I realized that wasn't important to them at all. Like they weren't operating off of that at all. And what they were trying to do was to justify like some FI point. And it's like a TE guard dog. Like they like to give many reasons. But then I realized later that I internalized all these things as TI, where I was like, oh, now I understand how you think more. And then later they take it all back and they're like, that's not what I meant at all. That's like what I'm trying to say.
No, I totally relate to that.
Yeah, like I finally figured out the guideline for what offends you and what doesn't, or like how you understand things. And that's
Right.
totally not what I did.
It's not.
They're like, yeah, because they were never trying to show you their TI. They had an FI, they weren't explaining. What FI users have told me is that they feel like the feeling alone, sometimes they're afraid it won't be accepted, or like it won't mean as much to you as it means to them. So what they'll do is they'll try to back it up with reasons, but those reasons aren't actually the important part. The important part was the initial conviction, which is the part I completely missed when I was trying to understand where they were coming from. Because if that makes any sense.
It does. Now, in the example you gave, Joyce, there's an implication, though. You imply their first or second FI. You're not talking about an INTJ.
No.
The people you described were basically FI 1 or 2, right? So
yeah.
What about the reverse, though? For an INTJ, you probably wouldn't have that, because then TE is stronger and FI just shows up occasionally, right?
Well, the symmetry there would kind of be reversed. I imagine like a TE Dom would have an FI guard dog. Like I remember one time my ESTJ dad, his stepdaughter wanted a certain pet in the house. And for TE reasons, he didn't want the pet in the house. But he used this FI thing like he had some personal conviction against keeping an animal that had to be put in a cage, when he really didn't at all. He just used that to get people to feel bad about getting the pet. So that's how it would look, I guess, if you flipped it over.
Yeah, so how does everyone deal with TJs and their FI?
I occasionally clash with TJs, but I don't know if it's because of FI or dominant TE, right? So it's an honest sharing of information. I often have issues with ESTJs, which I've said on in a sense that often they're very different styles. They try to get things done in a rushed manner. Sometimes they might be a little myopic, focus on the immediate rather than the large picture. Whereas my background is I like to sit on things and then do most of the work in the end, but then it will be correct because I spent some time thinking about it, which I think is a TE-TI kind of challenge. TE rushes to, I need to get this immediate thing done at the expense of potentially not looking too far around the corner and having to rework things. And I just spend a lot of time thinking about it, and they say, why aren't you started? And that's sort of the TE-TI challenge in a work context. And ideally, I find my best work partners, retroactively looking, before I knew MBTI, I had them tested and they were all INTJs. So I had these really great work relationships, either in school or in a work context, where I felt like we could do magic. And it was a nice balance between TE-TI, kind of keeping each other in check. That I will slow down the INTJ not to just be pragmatic short term, although they have vision, whereas they prevent me from dilly-dallying and not getting started, right? So I don't hate the other. I think they complement each other well if it's a balanced, communicative relationship.
It's interesting because there could be some typological background to this, because usually I'm more irritated by ISTJs than ESTJs. For maybe different reasons. Actually, kind of because they're too slow, I guess. They're like, no, let me just go check the manual for like another 3 hours just to make sure again before we get started. You know, I'm like, dude, we have to get it done today. I'm sorry.
Isn't that SI though? It's the SI part that says, well, no, let's not veer from what's been done. Let's not do anything new.
Exactly. Now, I would say STJs in general, I understand your frustration with some of them. And I think usually I like them better when they're older in general, are the ones that I like. The ones in maybe their 30s or their 40s or beyond. And it's probably just because they have more NE development, generally speaking, by that point.
Yeah, and I don't want to hate on it. It was primarily ESTJs in a work context, but what I want to throw in there, they seem to come in two flavors. I've noticed that at work, they're very extreme, which brings in the objective personality idea, which is sort of a big chunk for new folks. But if they have the notion of a jumper, somebody that would be TENE, these are the folks I can work with. They're rough. there's no warm feelings there, but they understand vision and they're open to suggestions, versus the guy who's just a micromanager that stands behind you and tries to tell you what to do. So I really find there seem to be two very distinct groupings in people who I know tested as ESTJ. My way of explaining it is possibly the jumping in objective personality disorder.
I'm really loving that Freudian slip, by the way. But
Wait, so it's pretty funny. The people who have Freudian slips on my channel, they tend to be NE users. Like, they think so fast that they accidentally say things that are like they slip up. That's happened more than twice on my panels.
yeah,
It's interesting what you guys are saying about being NTPs and kind of clashing with STJs. My dad is an ISTJ, and he and my INTP brother clashed really, really badly when my brother was younger. But I feel like, I don't know, I've always had a pretty good relationship with my dad, maybe because of the dominant SI. And I actually, when I first got into MBTI, I typed as an ISTJ. The T and F were really, really close. So, and that was before I really knew about cognitive functions. I feel like I admire sort of TE's ability to
get shit done.
Get things done. Yeah, get things done. And like be efficient about it, I guess, or like very like, I don't know. They usually find pretty interesting solutions to things, I find, especially like NTJs. I work with a lot of NTJs. But I feel like I'm not like, it can kind of spark some insecurity because I'm like, oh, I'm not really like, and I think because I'm a J, I want to be good at that too. But I find that I'm more prone to procrastinating, and that may just be like a personal thing. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah. For me, with TJs, it depends on if it's healthy TE or unhealthy TE. So with unhealthy TE, it can sometimes feel very micromanagey. Like they don't trust me that I can do it well, and so they keep watching over to see if I'm doing it well.
To the point you can feel their breath condensate on your glasses, saying, "What are you doing, dude?"
Yeah, but in the healthy form, sometimes they can make me feel very safe because they can be so competent. They know what they're doing. They have that structure down. They have everything covered, basically all the bases covered. There's this safe feeling sometimes I have around them. Like I can trust and I feel protected by their competentness. Yeah, so that's the flip side on healthy TE.
Yeah, I mean, the TE guys, they'll get shit done when nobody else will at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I don't want this to be a hate on TE users. This wasn't my intention.
I do respect that, yeah.
The dichotomy of, that's why I like to pair up with an INTJ in the past, because there is some synergy, you have each other's back, and if you respect each other, then actually, this is a jump. What is it? The TV show is about the two guys that blow shit up together. Because they're an ENTP INTJ pair, and
Mythbusters?
Mythbusters, yes, Mythbusters.
Oh, okay. I was thinking of a different show.
Okay, and
where all they do is blow shit up.
I recall seeing an article, and they have this funny relationship where, and I'm using a word, they presumably used the words, I'm using it in quotation marks, where they thought, yeah, but really, the other guy's just my bitch, quit. And like they both think they're the one in charge, but really none of them is, but they respect each other. But deep inside they think, yeah, but I'm the more productive member of the team. But it's sort of a nice symmetric relationship, and I think they're pretty funny there. I'm not saying that's how I related to my INTJ peers, but I think it's a really great work relationship. Especially for work, I prefer an NTJ because then there are no excessive feelings in the way of getting things done. I value feelings in a personal sense, but in a work context, it's strictly, okay, how about this? How about that? Okay, let's find a common ground and compromise. I find that a really awesome dynamics.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I will also have to point out that ENTJs do often make me feel like a useless idiot almost. Like, I'm like, wow, look at them just like doing shit effectively without even thinking about it.
But they probably killed a few people or broke a few hearts along the way.
Yeah,
Fired
maybe.
a few single moms just to make the quarter.
Good for them. Good for them. But yeah, I do have to respect them a lot because they are just they really do things that I can't do. Although I'm learning. Being a contractor has taught me a lot about using TE.
I want to go back to something I said earlier, because really I don't want this to be, oh, I hate TE, I hate FI. I don't. I have been challenged more so by the FI, TI, or at least dealing with FI, whether it's versus FE or not. But on the flip side, I mean, I can understand INFPs, the ones that I've occasionally clashed with under stress, when I touch on something that's very sensitive to them. I have learned in that situation, don't try to rationalize it, just hug it out and say, you know what, I care about you. I understand you have a strong conviction, but do not try to rationalize why a certain point of view is inappropriate. And on the flip side is they can look at us. I think we can be perceived as having no intrinsic values, because I consider almost anything, at least for a while, in a detached sort of way. I'm not saying I don't have any values, but to an FI person, I'm pretty valueless and pretty shrewd potentially, right? So I value their conviction, which I may not have. It has value, it's just not me, right? So there's benefit in having FI. If you have a moral compass going through the world, I think a lot of people that changed the world might have been strong on FI because they had a conviction, which I may have in a way more detached way. I think maybe this, maybe that, right? So
that's true. It kind of weirds my girlfriend out sometimes. I think that the way that it makes it really hard for her to understand me. Basically, the fact that I seem valueless. I think. I guess I feel like I'm more consistent because I'm consistent in these ways, but I guess in terms of values or convictions that I display, I may not be so consistent. So I guess that could be kind of a dichotomy there.
Yeah.
Maybe one more thing in defense of FI, I've said what I have challenges with in regards to FI, things I really appreciate. I find FI is by nature authentic. That's something I really appreciate. An FI person will normally tell you as it is. They're not going to butter you up. Whereas an FE user that's high, FE Dom or Ox, there's sometimes a tendency to placate, to tell a person what they think they might want to hear at the expense of not being authentic. Whereas an INFP, for example, I find them to be most authentic. There is no guesswork. There are no games that tell you how it is, which I really appreciate.
You're completely right about that. They cannot help being authentic. Whereas for us, it's almost like we have to remind ourselves that there is some authentic me to be.
For, let's say, ENFJ and even INFJ, I find sometimes it's very transparent to me. I'm an FE user. I say, you're placating me. And I'm almost insulted where I'm saying, you're a friend of mine. You're inside my inner circle. I expect or would like to have total honesty and authenticity, but even with close friends that are, let's say, FE DOMs, they can't help but tell you stuff that they might think you want to hear, and I'm almost not insulted and saying, weren't we beyond that? I thought we're that close. You can tell me what's on your mind, but an FE DOM will always fight that temptation.
Yeah.
What do you think, Joyce? I'm not trying to insult you, but it's...
I guess sometimes there's the urge to be appropriate for the FE Dom. So if they're afraid that if they share too much about themselves, it breaches a line of what would be comfortable in the atmosphere. So there's that, and so it can cause a blockage to actually expressing yourself.
An FE user is tempted to not say the hard things unless they're really close, and that's what I meant when I said earlier. I'm really close to somebody, and they're still giving me sort of it's almost like I feel like they're distancing themselves from me and making me question the closeness.
Yeah, that's so true. FE, at the end of the day, what it places its decision making on is the emotional feedback it's getting off of other people and whether or not it should share based off that feedback. But because it's basically like, should I share based off of the comfort or discomfort that it'll cause another person, like the feedback it'll eventually cause another person to feel. Whereas the FI user isn't like thinking that like, almost it's like judges are very, I'm so afraid to share my personal view. I'm FE placating myself right now. It's so hard to explain. It's so hard for me to say any opinion I have because I can instantly think about how people would disagree. So then I'm like, and then I'll stop myself and I'll go like, well,
I totally understand, Joyce. I completely understand.
We get it.
Like, yes. like I'm so reticent to criticize like anything, especially publicly, or at least with any conviction behind it, because what else was I going to say? I think there's a certain component, I think, where just FE people don't seem to value their own interpretations or perspectives on things as much as FI users do. And that's like a conscious thing.
Yeah, that is so true. A lot of opinions can be subjective in their own way, like kind of arbitrary. So it's like you'll hold one, but someone can hold the opposite perspective just as strongly. So what do you believe when that's the case?
Right.
Yeah, and I feel like FE is very aware of that.
It is. It's very aware of that.
Especially like if I have an opinion about something, then I automatically think of like how I don't have enough information to have that opinion. It's almost like I'm aware of all the TI like inconsistencies or whatever that could happen with that opinion, and so I don't often express those opinions because I feel like I don't have really enough to back it up.
Well, you can't rationalize them, basically, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And usually when I can rationalize an opinion, it's a lot easier for me to put the opinion out there and sort of debate it in a detached manner or have a discussion about it. Whereas if I'm like, I feel really strongly about something, but I don't necessarily have a lot to back it up, that's when I'm going to start to get hurt if people disagree. And so I'm just like, why even bother, putting that out there? Yeah.
And I've noticed that I think ISFJs are like, within our quadrant are probably the most, or INFJs, I guess, would be similar in this regard. They're more sensitive to like voicing something that could be TI incorrect than even a TI dom like me would be.
Yeah, I feel like because we have to do so much work in our TI to like back those things up, whereas I almost feel like higher TI can kind of, like if somebody disagrees with something, you can say, you can either ignore it or you can come up with stuff on the fly.
Right.
Natural for you.
Yeah. For FJs, we're not as good on the fly. So if we voice a TI opinion and someone disagrees, we don't know how to deal with that.
Right. Yeah. Oh shit, I wasn't expecting this. Yeah.
So how do you feel then? Do you say, I'll take that with me, or you feel, I got to think that over, and then 3 weeks later, remember when we talked the other day?
Yes.
Oh my God, I had a discussion with somebody like 2 years ago, right? And I have been thinking about this conversation ever since then because I know there's stuff wrong with what he said, but I could not for the life of me come up with anything in the moment. They asked me what I thought. I was like, and I gave some like ridiculous answer that didn't have that much to do with the actual logical premises. But since that conversation, I have come up with so many different things that I could have said. And I'm still thinking, like, I don't know why this one thing just, anyway, yeah, that happens.
You have the option of tracking them down. It's COVID. They're probably at home. Say, remember me?
I could Facebook message him and be like, hey, can I ask you a couple of questions about what you said 2 years ago that you probably don't even remember?
Or you just say, in response to your statement.
Just out of nowhere. Completely just, yeah.
Yeah, it's like TPs have delayed emotional responses sometimes, like FJs have delayed thinking responses. It's like, oh yeah, I thought for a while, now I know.
Yeah, either we won't know it or we don't want to admit it to ourselves. No, because I know sometimes I'll be like, what? I won't let that make me feel bad. Get the hell away from me. But I don't actually have a choice. I don't know.
Isn't TI great though? Because I mean, you could say I might be delusional, but honestly, I really feel really hurt. I might get pissed off at something.
Yeah. And also the delayed emotional responses are normally from thinking dominance. It's not thinking auxiliaries normally, it's thinking dominance. Yeah. Cool. And so back to the topic. Our thoughts on FITE.
Okay, maybe the idea about TE, because I mean, I mentioned I value TE in let's say an INTJ, but also, and I had touched on that with Spacey in another discussion briefly, is I feel that under duress, I can really, it's almost like TE pushes itself in the foreground, and I throw, let's say, 5 minutes before something needs to get done, I feel like how I believe an ENTJ or INTJ would be acting, and I would attribute it to what I believe is TE. I could be mistaken, but it's just all of a sudden everything falls away. Yes, I like my complete systems, but I need to get something done by 5 o'clock, and all of a sudden somebody else takes over. Is that real TE? How do you relate to that? Have you been in that situation?
That's TE. I guess for me in the ignoring position, it's, how do I put it? It's something that like, it only kicks in when like I become like frustrated or irritated that in the current environment, there is like TE things that have to be considered and nobody else around me seems capable of considering them. And although I tend to just want to ignore all this shit and not have to put up with it at all, I'm still more capable of engaging it. And so when I'm around people who are just like, who just refuse to do any TE, then I'll actually I can almost flip into like a TE dom or something. Like it's pretty bad. Like there's been times where I was literally doing that thing you talk about where I'm like watching somebody like a hawk, like, and they feel like, you know, I don't trust them to do anything right. And like that kind of deal, because that's, but it's only when I become like really paranoid that nobody else can do any TE, basically.
Okay, then we can both relate. It's not just me pretending to have TE.
Yeah, but there's also that crunch time aspect where it's like, okay, I can no longer deny that I only have 5 minutes, right, to get this done. Right?
I feel like I really appreciate FI because they help keep me grounded. Like if I'm experiencing an issue where I feel like I am kind of being pulled a lot of different directions by different people, if I sit down and talk about an FI user with it, they will remind me of like what I value and who I am kind of. And I feel like they're really good at grounding me in that way. Anyway, I kind of went on a tangent there, but
Yeah, I really appreciate that about FI. It'll remind you like who you are. If you go into a field and they notice you not being yourself, they'll go like, is this really who you are? Are you sure this is in line with how you see yourself? And then I'm like, I didn't even think about, like, I don't really care about who the self is, but it's sweet that you care.
Yeah. But with TE, like, I guess like it kind of varies depending on like my relationship with the person, but I have known, like, I think TE can be really, my therapist is actually an ENTJ, and she can be really blunt, but I find that like her insights are very good for me. Like she gets me to think about things in new ways. And I really appreciate that. And I feel like it's sort of good for me to be around that because it, like she can just be really honest with me, I guess. And like, I don't know, with my dad, I know a lot of ESTJs, but I feel like I get along pretty well with ISTJs. Like, I think we have good, like I worked with an ISTJ too, and I feel like that was a really good working relationship. Like she gave me a lot of guidance on how to do things, and I feel like as an SI user, like I really appreciated that, like that similarity there. But anyway.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And so to add on to that point, you know, FI users wanting you to notice if what you're doing is in line with your values and who you are. I think it's because they care about their own authenticity. They also care about guarding yours as well. So they want to guard your authenticity too.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about FI. So it'll look out for you as a person, and it'll see you as a distinct person apart from the group too. So it'll kind of go like, hey, you apart from the group you are a part of, and they'll kind of like, they'll treat you like you are an individual, and they'll understand you as if you are an individual.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of a common like theme with both like TJs and FPs that I know. Like, I feel like they really see you as a person, and they really know you like as an individual. Yeah.
I think that's a really good point. They appreciate you. They go all the way to appreciate you as an individual, which you might not get from an FE user, because they're sort of like, yeah, you're one of the herd.
Yeah, and I think FE users can appreciate people as individuals. It's just it really has like a depth with FITE.
I think it's hard for us maybe to separate them from the rest of everything that's going on, kind of, and so it's hard to kind of isolate them as an individual in the same fully conscious sense.
Yeah, I could see that. I think with FETI, we tend to look for patterns with people a lot, like more so than FITE does. So it's a more broad focus on like people in general,
right?
Whereas FITE is a little more like individual focused.
Well, I think they're much more sharply attuned to basically the interactions between the people that concern them. They understand how stuff works on a level that I can't really explain sometimes, basically. They know what caused this to happen, and without having to think about it. They actually innately are aware of like energetic dynamic interaction between objects, including people. And so that's why they see things with such clarity in that way, I guess, when it comes to individual people.
Yeah, what I also love about FI users is their ability to spot intentions, or how deeply they pierce into people's intentions. So they're seeing your TE behavior, and they're trying to trace the FI from it. What I've heard some FI users say is that they pay a lot of attention to figuring out intentions. I feel really cared about by FI users because they sometimes try to figure out what's going on with me on a deeper level. So they'll kind of infer into what you're feeling, even if there's no feeling there. So there have been times where FI users have told me that I've been feeling something when I haven't been feeling it, but it's because they'll look into they'll make emotional inferences a lot.
That's a good time. An observation about FI users. This is specifically a bunch of INFPs. They have a tendency, everything is personal. You're in a work context. They often have difficulties understanding this is not about you. It's impersonal. This is a company. And I've noticed 2 or 3, they are struggling often INFPs struggle in a corporate environment, maybe for that very reason, because their basic tendency is, I interpret the world personally. You do something to me, it must be personal. It's in their nature. That's just how they see it.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. It makes things personal because I think they're only able to analyze things in relation to their relationship or connection to something else.
And I wonder why that's correlated, why statistically, probably INFPs are some of the, and I'm guessing, I could be wrong, least happy person in a corporate environment, because they have to feel like I matter. I need that feeling, but to a lesser degree than an INFP. And because I've known many of them were really unhappy. They're happy when they can do their own thing. They start their own furniture business. And another correlate might be because of this desire for things to be personal. I wonder if you do a statistical analysis, you look at FI DOMs or boxes versus FE. I wonder if there's more SXs among the FIs than the FEs. Because SX also, in an Enneagram context, wants a personal connection. Now, I am SX first, and I'm FE DOM, or FE preferrer, but still, I wonder if it's more common to be FX for FI DOMs. I don't know if there's stats out there.
Oh, that wouldn't surprise me at all, but I don't think there's any good statistics. And any statistics that I have seen show that INFPs are the least happy type in general.
Which is consistent.
I agree. So of the people I've paneled, the most people to associate themselves with the SX instinct tend to be FI users. It's a correlation, not one-to-one, but you are right about that, Boris.
Okay. So it's already been done. I thought I had a new idea, but it's already out there.
And so, Boris, you mentioned INFPs in the workplace. So the INFP, one of the greatest difficulties in their life is to find a job that pays well, and it's also something they care about as well. Yeah. So that, like, figuring out something that they'll feel happy and feels fulfilling to do and also pays well. That's like the FI hero's journey for some INFPs.
I feel like I can relate to that to an extent too. Like I can operate in sort of an impersonal way, but I don't like to. Like I would prefer, I like smaller environments. I like interacting with people as opposed to having to work on processes or things. I like that kind of familiar, safe feeling, I guess, that I get from that. And the corporate environment can feel very cold and very like I have to turn off my FE to an extent, which I can do, but I don't like it. And I feel like my favorite coworkers almost invariably end up being NFPs because they bring that sort of level of warmth and like personal rapport to what they, and I feel like I just hit it off with them, like, especially in a work context, I find that we can get work done together really well, but we can also have that kind of friend relationship too. But yeah, I could totally see that for INFPs being really unhappy in a corporate environment.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Natalie. And so that brings us back to that dichotomies. I see this as a feeler versus thinker type of thing, whereas feelers are innately more personal and thinkers are innately more impersonal. Yeah, in general, but TI and TE are different. They're impersonal in different ways, whereas FI and FE are personal in different ways. Yeah.
Whatever you said about emotional inferences basically was good. Where like you're having a feeling like ascribed to you. But I guess I've now realized that the logical inferences, I do like the thing where basically I assume that I know what somebody's thinking based on what they're doing or saying.
Yeah, that's true. So TI is logical inferences and FI is emotional inferences. I don't know. Food for thought.
Yeah.
Is that enough to build a new personality theory around? Maybe. How is that coming, Joyce?
Well, no, I think combined with extroverted intuition, it probably results in a lot of inferences.
Interesting. And so any last thoughts about FI-TE y'all have?
FI is magical, and FI dominant people are energy geniuses.
They really are. Yeah. FI adds a unique signature onto the world, and thank you for just the amazingness of the deep well of how you are able to internalize your convictions and to really enact change in the world through TE, through these emotional convictions. So you FI users are really great. It's magical, as they say.
And the TI dudes, I need one of you to be complete in a work context. So I value both, right? And as we said earlier, sometimes if there's a vacuum with Spacey, I think I can emulate TE. And actually, I had friends who told me, Boris, what happened? Somebody pulled the switch. You're a different person now. Doesn't only happen in a work context. Sometimes, and I guess everybody gets it, FE allows you to listen and empathize. But if somebody fills my FE bucket, I'm saying it's time to do something about your problems. Yeah. Then I almost become not an asshole, but they say, you're a different person. It's like, no, let's get something done. Let's set a deadline. How are we going to address this? We talked about this 4 times. Let's do it.
So I can actually relate to that, but only as of recently.
Okay.
It's funny.
Yeah. So basically, thinkers get so annoyed if you get overly emotional, and they're like, okay.
Then they become a different person. Because it's like,
actually, I really, really love when NTPs help me solve my emotional problems in practical ways. because I feel like I'm that person who I will just complain about something over and over again. And they're like, well, okay, let's generate some solutions. And it's like, and then I don't know, like one of my friends will be like, she'll like apologize for trying to fix my problems instead of listening. I'm like, no, that's exactly what I was unconsciously looking for. Like, that's what I need. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, sometimes it's really hard to tell whether you're actually doing something for their own good or not. Like, do they appreciate it or not? Man, should I have bothered? Dang. So, if you do end up appreciating it, please let us know.
I usually do very much appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you everyone for coming out. I really appreciate all the thoughts that y'all sprinkled into the conversation, all the FETI wondrous opinions you've had. Yeah. I loved how in the middle of this chat, we all placated each other and we're like, oh wait, should I say this? Okay, I'm not sure if so that FE placation was real. Anyways, so yeah. Thank you so much, Spacey, for explaining your experiences with your INFP girlfriend and explaining your insights on FI. There was a lot of truth in what you were saying when you were explaining how TI users don't really have a preference sometimes that they'll cling on to. So bang on, Spacey, as usual. And Boris, thank you for just your lively, jovial type 7 energy. You really brought a lot of comic relief into this chat.
I'm a 7 with 8. I'm not a 7 with 6. I'm sure you're shocked. 7 winging.
Yeah. So you brought a lot of smiles and good cheer and a lot of interesting connections that you brought with the 3 INFPs you've dated. It brought a lot of insight onto your opinion on FI. So
it took me a long time to figure it out. Hug it out, Boris. Don't try to argue it. Reason doesn't apply. Inference, there's no inference with FI, especially if it's pricked and startled.
I think I have a lot more to learn, Boris.
You have a good teacher.
Yeah.
She will let you know. They will let you know.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, turns out like FTPs and FPs seem to be kind of attracted to each other sometimes because you've dated quite a few. But I realized that sometimes the TP, the TI user, will offend the FI user or do something that is like, whoa, you did that. So
I'm saying, but it's totally consistent. Like, that was wrong.
That is quite hilarious. Yes. So thank you, Boris, for just the funny interjections and the tensions, any tensions. And Nat, thank you for bringing the FJ perspective and really bringing that FE warmth into the conversation too. I feel it, and I love how you just come with this well of emotional consideration too, and you don't like to say things that'll hurt people's feelings, and that's amazing. I love that trait about you. And I like your ability to tie in your knowledge of socionics plus MBTI because you can see how they're compatible in certain ways. So you provide this really cool new perspective which ties these two systems together in a very fascinating way. I really enjoy that about you, Nat.
There's got to be at least one other feeler in the group. Otherwise, those NTPs are kind of dry, right?
Yeah. So it's a great thinking and feeling panel today, not too overpowering in any sense. Yeah. So thank you, team, for bringing your impersonal perspective, and thank you, Nat, for your FE personal perspective. Yeah. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Joyce, for putting up with us.